Yeah, just to refresh your memory, I suppose, and just to help you remember all those commands that we looked at last week, we'll go if you open up your Learn page, we're going to go into the short exercises tonight. So down.
For some reason why the Learn thing's not loading. Should I just try a different computer?
Let's have a look. Yeah, so in the short exercises section, we've got Revit short exercises there. If you haven't done the quiz, if you want to finish the interface quiz tonight, get that done. The main thing we'll start with is these exercises. So they're basic sketching and modifying exercises. There's 3 exercises, 2A, B and C. And they just roll on from one another. So you start with A and then just keep it opened and keep going with B and then C. And so you start with this simple building exercise. So if you open up that in Revit, I'll show you how to do that in a second, and then you just open up the exercise as you go. So if you slide that one onto your second screen, have Revit open on the main screen, you'll just work through. So it gives you a bit of an estimated time for completion on the left as well. I usually find people probably take about an extra 5 minutes from what's on there. So work through those, and I'll come around and give anyone a hand if they need it, but you must start with the template file that's supplied. So in here it talks about opening up and the download folder. We've already got that file there for you, so you don't have to go through that step. So if you don't remember so far to open Revit, just go to your Windows key, start typing Revit, and you'll get the 2019 desktop app. So just click on that. And while that's opening, if you go back to your Learn page, what we want to do is actually download that simple building file that's there. So if you click on that, it'll start asking you whether you want to save it. I'll say save that file, and it'll start going up here into your downloads. So you can take a copy of that if you want, keep that on your own drive if you want to find it somewhere else. Otherwise you can open it from your downloads folder. So once Revit's open, if you go to open, and I'm going to look in my downloads folder where I've saved it. So we go into the computer here. There's my downloads folder, and it's this simple building exercise. We open that up. And this is where we'll start drawing. So you need this because it's got your levels, but it's also got some certain wall types that you'll need loaded into your browser. So if you don't start with this template, you won't have the right wall types to sort of use there. Alright. And then you'll just start working on those exercises. All good? So if we just have a look at my screen now, I'll just go through a couple of one of the things on there that was the array tool, which we didn't go through when we looked at the tools and the modified tools last week. So the array tool is sort of quite complex, but it's once you actually understand what it's suggesting and what you're trying to do with it, it becomes quite a good tool and a useful tool. So I'll have a quick look at that. So I've just started up a new architectural template and just looking at the ground floor here. So the array tool, if I sort of decided that I was going to set out something like this room maybe for some desks and some chairs, rather than use the copy tool and add one desk and copy another and then do the same with the chairs, we could actually use the array tool to do a linear array, so long, And in your case, you had one that was like a radial array. So you went in the last bit of that exercise, you arrayed, what did you array? Was it desks or something? Desks around, yeah. So I suppose to sort of think about that in a little bit more of a simpler context, if I just place in a circular table, in here, and then I wanted to put some chairs around it, I could come into the components and pick a chair. If I place this chair here at the bottom, and I wanted to go around the chair, it'd be just a case of using that array tool. So I'd select the chair, which brings my modified tools up. This is the array icon, so AR is the shortcut, and so this is the part where you sort of got quite a few options and there's different reasons for using it. So you get the choice of linear or radial. So if we want to go round this table, it would be a radial choice. And how many desks or how many chairs we want around, we can put the number. Or in your case, I think you got to pick the last position. Is that right? Or did you pick
10, 15, oh, 15, sorry, yeah.
So you picked a number, yeah. And then did you show it the last position or just the angle? I think you just showed it the angle, didn't you? Yeah. So so when we want to sort of place the center of rotation, if we don't move this where it's rotating on this at the moment, it's just going to rotate the chair around that central axis. So that's where you sort of got to choose where you're placing that. So if I said that I actually wanted to, if I say I'm going to have 4 chairs and I'm going to place it last, the placement is going to be the center of this desk. And so once I start to actually rotate this, I'm actually going to show it where the last position is. So you can see that one there, and if I say that's my last, that didn't work because it's put them in between there. I should have probably gone to that. I went the opposite way. It was the other way, so I'll just do that again. So I'll do that one and array tool, and we're going to go 4 chairs. So the number of items that you put in includes the one that's there. And so I'll place the center rotation there, and this time I'm going to pick it this way. And that still didn't do it the right way around, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Maybe I needed to put the second position. Let's just try that. Second position, 4 chairs, place that in the center there. So we're going to place it there. Yeah, that's better. So placing it at the second position, it adds the 4 in that even position. So that first one I placed to show it there, and it's added 1, 2 more. So they've added all 4 like that around. Okay. So the other question that I had when you were doing that was if I just go to say do an array again, one of the options says it said to you to untick group and associate, and what that is I kept mine ticked. So you can see when I click on these, it's linking them all to each other. So that means they're grouped. And so the benefit of grouping them is that if I decided I wanted extra chairs in there now, I could actually change that number to 6, and it would add an extra 6 in there, but it won't because that on that angle. I'll show you with a linear one. But the downside of keeping it grouped is if I want to move one of these, it won't let me move it because they're constrained to that radius. So what I've got to do if I want to move it is actually edit the group or ungroup it, and then it will let me move it out because it's not part of the group. Oops. So once it's ungrouped. So if I try it with a rectangular desk this time, and I said I wanted to set up a room and sort of have a couple of rows of desks. Say I'm going to have 4 rows of desks there. I could actually say I'm going to use the array tool, and I want to keep it as linear array. I'm going to have the number of desks to 4, and I'm going to move it to the second position. So what that means is where I place this next one is the second position, giving me the right distance between the desks, and then it will continue to add whatever number I've added, being the total number of desks. So if I place this one here, you'll see that evenly that's placed at 4. Now if I want to change that to 8, I can type it in there and it will just change it to 8. So because they're grouped, again, if I want to move one or delete one from the end, I've got to either edit the group and ungroup it, edit the group or ungroup it to just move one. So that's what that option is. If I do that again and place that desk here, and I say this time I'll do exactly the same thing. So we're going to do linear, we'll have 8 desks, and I'll move it to the second position, but this time I'm going to ungroup, so not group and associate ticked. So this time you can see when I click them, I haven't got the option to add an extra number or change that group, whereas this one had that group set up. So that's what that tick box allows you to do. So what I tend to do if I use this tool, which I do quite a bit, is I always keep it grouped and associated, because if you decide that, oh, actually I need a few more, it's very easy just to change that, or a few less, and say I just want 4 now, and you can do it. You don't have to sort of start again. Then if you decide that that's it and you need to move one of them or something, you just easily ungroup it and take one away, sort of thing. Whereas when you've got it like that, you've almost got to sort of, each one's individual. Okay. So so that just sort of hopefully just shows you what some of the other commands were that you were playing with there. So we're going to leave that exercise for now, and so save it and close down your project by hitting the little red, the little black cross on your view tabs. And you might want to save your projects as you go. And what we want to do now is we're going to open a new architectural template. So let's go to the new button up here. So we'll go new and we'll get this dialog box up. And we're going to open up a architectural template. But it's going to create the template as a project. And that's what we want. So the architectural template that it's choosing is a template file. The file extension would be RTE, but we want to convert it to a project file, which is an RVT file. So that's the difference between that and that. Okay. So project files, something that you're going to work on, is always an RVT, which is a Revit file, project file. So it's looking for these templates, and we're now creating from the template, creating a drawing file. Okay. So we'll say OK, and that just opens that up, ready to draw. So now when we say, if we want to save this file, just this for practice, this is what we would do most times. As soon as you open one up, you would hit the File tab, you'd do a Save As Project up here, and wherever you want to save it, you know, wherever you're working, whether it's at home or in a drive or whatever, you'll find where you want to save it. And I'll just put this on my desktop for now. And the next thing we want to do is change in here before we hit save, is either change the name, because it's just going to be called Project 1 if it's the first time you've opened this template. So we can just call this one Practice 1 or something like that. And before we actually hit the Save button, there's an Options button on that dialog box. Can everyone see that Options? Now that Options allows us to minimize the backups, because Revit is quite overly backed up, I suppose, by default. Like there's 20 backup files going to be saved. So what that means is wherever you're saving it, if you kept it as 20, every time you press save, it just keeps another journal until it reaches 20. So you'd have 20 copies from various times that you've hit save in your drive or whatever. And Revit files can be quite large, so it just means it's using up lots of space. So what I tend to do is just actually minimize that and just say 2 backup files. So that actually means we're going to have 3 files, the working file plus 2 other backup files. So we've still got plenty of files if something goes wrong to find a backup file. So just get into the habit of always doing that, otherwise you'll find at home every time you're working on Revit, you'll have 20 files of something, and it becomes quite storage hungry. I've worked for some businesses, and that was what we've had to do, because the server was just full all the time, and we've had to go back in and look at all the clients' jobs, and it was people had just been pressing save, and it was always 20 versions of their drawings. But by quickly going and saving the original and changing the backup down, it deletes all those other journals. It'll get rid of those and always just have that too. So it's just, but it's a big job to go in and do that all the time. So let's say 2. I'm going to say save. So, and this is just a bit of basic sort of stuff. If I now hit the save icon up here, so I'm saving it again, and then I'm going to hit it again. If I look at my desktop where I've been saving it, what did I call mine? Practice. So there it is. I've hit save twice. Practice 1 and Practice 1 001 and 002, or 0001 and 0002. Okay. The actual file, so this is just so you know, whenever you've got these backup files, the latest version, and the one that you should always open up to start work again on after you've closed down, is the one with no number after it. Obviously it's got number 1 because that's what we called it, but it's the 00 whatever number. That's a backup file, so it's always a bit older than the other one. So if I don't save now for 30 minutes and then I hit save again, it would have that new one, and the number 2 or number 1 would be 30 minutes difference between those times, if that makes sense. So just to sort of prove that out, because I've waited till the time ticked over a bit there, if we hit save now, and I'll go in and have a look, notice now how it's got number 3 there and number 2, and you can see that where number 2 is, wherever that's gone, there's practice 1, practice, and then 2, back up 2 and 3. Okay, so 1's been superseded by this one called 3 now. That makes sense? Okay. So you can see the difference in time. Those couple were created at 7:12. This one is 7:13. But that's another thing to check when you're looking for your files, is just have a look at the newest time and date stamp as well. But it'll always be this one. Unless you've accidentally gone in and opened one of these and started working on that, then that would obviously be the latest file. And that does happen. And I've even done it before, and it tends to happen sometimes if you're in a bit of a hurry, and also sometimes when our browser's closed up a bit, so when you look at what you're looking for, you might not sort of see all those numbers, and you'll just see, oh, that's the project I'm looking for, and you click on it, but you've accidentally clicked on a backup file. And how you usually tell is as you're drawing, you'll be doing something, maybe an hour into drawing up a house, and you go, I have a feeling I did this. Did I do this yesterday? Or it might be, did I do this morning before I went to lunch and had a pint? You know, it's those sorts of things that sort of happen to you, and you think, what, have I done this? And then you look and you go, oh, I'm working on a backup file, I did do it, because you're often in a job, you're working on multiple different jobs, you just don't remember exactly where you were at. So really important just to get into the habit of saying, right, I need the one without a number stamp on the back of it, okay? That'll save you a bit of time in life. Any questions about that? So we've opened a new architectural template, we've saved it, we've renamed it, and we've reduced the backup files down. The next thing that we've sort of got to start thinking about doing is setting up our levels. So this is sort of just getting you into drawing something from scratch. And if you look in one of your elevations, you'll notice that this template, if I go to my east elevation there, has some levels set up by default. Now, what we tend to do is, if we had a template at work or something, we would probably already have our levels for a single story, what we would use. If it's 2.4 ceiling or 2.7, we'd have that set up. But what we need to do in this case is to actually set up some ceiling height. So this next exercise that we're going to do actually comes from the Learn site. Oh, not that one. So if you open up Learn, you'll see that underneath that building that we just opened to do those other exercises, we've got a PDF that's called AutoCAD Link Exercise Door and Window Guide. This little PDF here is going to be what we use to draw up this building as a bit of practice. And it's actually showing us what levels we need, and it's telling us what our floor to ceiling height is. So we're going to set up these 3 levels here. Okay. So we're going to set up a new level being the ground line, or the ground level, which is 400 below the finished floor level. And then we're going to set up the finished ceiling level at 2720. So we'll come back into here. So if you want to open that one up and slide it onto your other screen, you can. So when we set up these levels, these are sort of our building levels, and we can set up multiple levels as we go, but we obviously have to have something to constrain our walls to when we start drawing them. So what I would tend to do is get the first 2 that are already there, just modify those 2 existing ones. So let's call this ground floor. Let's click in there and rename it FFL, finished floor level. And it says, would you like to rename the corresponding views? I'm going to say yes. And we'll click into the level 1 stamp and rename that one FCL, finished ceiling level. And we want to change the height from 4 meters to 2720, I think it told us to do. And we want a 3rd level that's going to be 400 below the finished floor level and renamed ground level. So what we can do with these levels is we can actually create a new level from one of these levels, or we can go up into our architecture tab, look along to the end, and there's a datum panel, and that's got a button called level. And so that's the tool that we're going to use, the level tool. And so when you click on that level, you get the option to sort of start drawing in a new level. But rather than have to sort of click to start and drag it across and give it some heights, we can actually use this offset in the option bar here and give it an offset from the, we'll use our bottom line as our reference and give it 400 as an offset. So if we type 400 in there, and instead of using the pick line drawing tool, you can see the one next to it, the green line, that's pick line. So if we click the pick line tool, all we've got to do is hover over that bottom finished floor level, and you'll notice that whether you touch the top or the bottom, you'll get a little blue line 400 away. And we want to make sure that it's below the finished floor level. So when you see that little blue line below, you just click and it places that next level. Just click once and then hit escape twice to get you out of that command. If you click a few times, you're going to just keep adding more levels. Did everyone manage that? So the other option was we could have picked this level and we could have drawn a new one in without having an offset, but it just means we've got to sort of come down, draw it, finish it, and then we've still got to change the height and that. So it's just a slightly longer way to do it. So Revit's all about trying to do things a bit quicker. So the level that is there now is now called level 2 and minus 400, but we want to name it level or GL for ground line. So click in where it says level 2 and just type in GL. Say yes to that. But notice that it's all sort of stamped over the other numbers, so it's pretty hard to see what where the finished floor level is or what numbers they are. So we have another tool that's associated with this, and when we click on that bottom level line that we've placed in, can you notice that just above that 400 there's a little tiny zigzag? Can everyone see that little zigzag? It's an elbow. So if you click on that, it adds a little elbow, adds a bendy piece to your level line, which allows you to grab those blue nodes and sort of manipulate them, either pull them in or down or up, and get it down and away from that finished floor level. So it allows us to have some levels that are quite close to each other but pull the actual figures down and away. This keeps it a bit neater. And the other thing that you might have noticed when you clicked on one of these level lines, when we did it, we've got a whole heap of other sort of boxes and ticks and things like that happening. Now, if I use my finished ceiling level as an example, you'll notice that up this end, where it says finished ceiling level, it's got a tick in this box. But at the other end, it hasn't got a tick in the box. So all that's doing is turning on this label. So if I tick this end, it allows me to have a label at both ends, or I could actually untick this one and just have a label at the left-hand end. Okay, so it depends on what we're drawing, how much we've got to fit on a sheet, where we want the level read from. Might be closer to one end of the building and not the other that we're using this level. For example, you know, a parapet wall on a portico or something like that. It might be that your elevation's only showing it on that side. So there's no point in having the figure on this side and someone's got to come right across the sheet to see what that's associated with. So there's reasons that we might use either side. It's not a right nor a wrong. So, so that's what that does. The other thing that you might notice is when we've got this click, there's a little round circle at the end. Now that's like a little grip that allows us to pull these levels out and in, and that changes our view on this elevation. So what it's doing is actually where the elevation's facing is giving us left or right view. So if we draw in the middle of our elevation markers, we shouldn't need to change that because the view, say for the north elevation, is this line here. That's the length of those elevation lines. But if I've drawn something over here, the end of the elevation lines might have a house sort of here. Okay, so that's the other beauty about sort of thinking about where you're going to draw in here. If you draw in the middle, you're going to be in the middle of your elevation markers. Does that make sense? Now I think I mentioned last week in your project browser as well, it does get a bit confusing because the names of our levels now have been populated as names of the floor plan, but they're also the identical names in the ceiling plans. So what I tend to tell people to do is minimize the ceiling plan category in your project browser, just so you don't accidentally go over and click on those views, because those cameras are looking up, and so when we start drawing things in the floor plan, if you go over to that, you'll see the ceiling and you'll look like you've got nothing in your drawing except a few walls. So we've got these levels now, and there's one other thing that we need to sort of check. Our north, so has everyone started on their east? Or yep. If we go to the north, you'll notice that we've got all the same levels, but they haven't been populated very well. It hasn't got that elbow in the bottom again. So if we pop that elbow in the bottom again for practice, click on the bottom line, hit that little elbow on the ground level line and drag that down. What we can actually do, once we've done the east and the north, we can actually transfer that little elbow and how we've dragged it to the opposing views. And so by clicking on the line that we've just done, so that ground line, you'll notice that up the top now in the modify levels, you've got this propagate extents button. So if you hit propagate extents, it'll give you the opposing views that you can actually apply it to. So we want to apply it to our south elevation. Don't have to worry about the section at this stage. Say OK. Go back into your east elevation. Click on that bottom line again and do the same. Propagate to the west. And that just saves you having to go into the south and the west and hitting the elbow and dragging it. It'll just make it a bit quicker. All right. So now we've got all our levels set up, quite neat on our 4 elevations. And this is really just that workflow. We've opened up a new project, we've saved it, we've minimized the backups, we've called it a new name, we've created some levels and got them all neat on each one. And then you're pretty well ready to start drawing, or at least setting up your drawing ready to go. So just to sort of, just before we get into the project that we're going to do, let's just go to our finish floor level. That's the level that we're going to work on and draw on. And so just a reminder of what we did last week, when we start to draw walls, we hit the wall button. We only have to hit the top part of the wall button, because that's the architectural options. And in the properties of those walls, we get all these generic wall types that come with this template. So just for this example, let's just use a brick veneer 250 timber. And what's the first thing we're going to do before we click to start drawing? Anyone remember? Change the what, sorry?
Change your wall centre line.
We don't necessarily have to change that one yet, but that's, yeah, good point. We could do finish face exterior like we did last week, yep. So finish face exterior. But the main thing is we want to connect the height, because now we've just set up those levels to a finished ceiling level. By default, this is going to do an unconnected height of 8 meters. We don't really want our walls being 8 meters if we've just set up a finished ceiling height 2.7. Okay, so let's hit the connect. So instead of unconnecting in that box, let's actually pick one of the levels, which is the finished ceiling level. So the finished ceiling level, if we pick it in there, or we can pick it down in our constraints in the properties, actually now connects it. So when we first click this to place the wall, we're going to be drawing on the finished floor level. That's our base, and it's going to draw it up to the height of the finished ceiling level. Okay. So that's sort of why we set our levels up a step before this, because otherwise we don't have an ultimate level to do it to. We've got to go backwards afterwards and try to figure out those levels. So all those drawing tools, depending on how you want to draw your walls, if we want to just sort of draw some, you know, a rectangular house, we can just click around, type in our distances, etc. Change our detail level to medium, and then we also get into the habit of working in thin lines. Remember that shortcut, TL? And so if you just draw a rectangle, have a little look in 3D and just orbit it around a bit just to get yourself back into the swing of things. All right. So let's go back to our finished floor level now. And has everyone got 4 walls in there? Does everyone draw a rectangle or anything like that? Just delete those, whatever you've drawn. We'll just delete those walls. So I've done a window crossing that's just grabbed the walls. If I want to check that I've only got the walls, I can come up to my filter and just see that, yeah, it's only walls that I'm deleting. Okay, and hit your delete button. And what we're going to do is come back over to, so we're just starting with blank, nothing drawn at this stage. We're going to come back into this exercise, and what we're going to do here is we're actually going to bring in an AutoCAD 2D drawing of this house and trace over it to make it 3D. And then we'll put all the windows in using the AutoCAD plan as a point of reference, and then we can actually use that model as something to put some floors on and some roofs and that sort of thing. We'll see how far we get tonight. So what we've got to do first is we've got to actually download this AutoCAD floor plan from Learn. So just above this AutoCAD link, so with this one here. So if you just click on it, save the file somewhere that you remember. Mine's gone into my downloads folder there. Which is fine, I can grab it from my downloads as long as I've got it there. Everyone managed to download it somewhere? All good? So what we're going to do now is, and why we show you how to do this is so it becomes a little bit more of a simpler first drawing exercise. Get you used to loading your windows and doors in, but when we use Revit, if we've ever got AutoCAD files or we get AutoCAD files from other consultants, it's very good to be able to know how to bring them in and use them as references. So for example, it might be from an engineer, they might have some reference drawings that you could bring in. It might be a surveyor. 9 times out of 10, the surveyor is going to give you an AutoCAD file. So you can bring that in, so you've got your boundaries and your existing trees and things like that on the site that you don't have to worry about, you know, trying to guess where they are. And it might be that you've got an existing house that you accessed some CAD files from somewhere and there's someone's doing an extension. So you're going to start with the existing as-built house and then draw on the extension, etc. So in our finished floor plan, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the Insert tab and we're going to use the Import panel and what we're going to do is import CAD. So we're going to import CAD. Over on the left there is a linkable panel as well, and that does have the ability to link a CAD plan. Anyone guess what the difference might be between a linked and an imported CAD plan? So we could use the same plan, but one's going to be linked and one's going to be imported. Any guesses? If it's linked, it means that it's actually not, it completely imported it from the server. So if it's somewhere at work and we say we're going to link it, it means that if something happens to that CAD file on the server, i.e. someone else wants to update it or change it, we've only linked to it. So we'd probably get a message that says the CAD plan's changed, do you want to update it? And then you can just update your, and the changes will happen on your link because it's referencing that server. If it's imported, it's standalone. So if that original copy is changing somewhere, yours is going to be still wrong. So then you've got to delete yours and reload it or decide to link it. If you were at an office or something and you said, well, I'm going to take my machine home and work on it overnight, you don't want it linked. You want to import it, otherwise you might not have access to that server from your connection at home. So there's pros and cons depending on what you're going to do with it. So tonight we're just going to import it so that it stays in, it's just a separate standalone copy, I suppose, of that CAD plan that you've downloaded. So we go import CAD, and this is where we've got to search. So I saved mine in my downloads folder. So I can look in my downloads, and there it is. So the file types that it's searching for down here is, because we've picked CAD, is DWGs. Okay, we could change it if we had different types of files. So we can import SketchUp files, etc., 3D Max files. So we want a DWG, which is an AutoCAD drawing file. So what we do is we select it by clicking it just once. If we click it twice, it's going to import it straight away, but we haven't actually looked at the options on this dialog box. So we just select it once, and you can see it in your view there. And so a couple of the important things to bear in mind here is I only want this to come into my floor plan on Revit. I don't want to open every view and see this CAD plan in multiple views. So I tick current view only. Okay. Otherwise, even when I open my elevations, I'm going to see it lying flat on my elevations, all four of them. I don't need to see it there. It's useless. You can preserve colors, or you can change it to black and white. It's probably best to preserve the colors in this case because it defines what things are, I suppose. It gives it a slightly different look than what we're going to be drawing in Revit. It's all black and white. So you'll see that that's the different layer. It's going to bring all the layers in at the moment. We can use import units. It'll auto detect that it's in millimeters. We're working in millimeters, so they'll match up. Positioning is an interesting one. You can bring it in as an auto, or you can bring it in as manual. So the idea of manual is that it'll be on the end of your cursor and you'll drop it where you want. I tend to think that the manual way is slightly better, because what I find with lots of imported CAD files is they've often got an origin point that's slightly different to what you're working in that center of your Revit model space. And I often find students will say, I've been importing this file and I just can't see it. It's not working. And what it is, it's actually importing up out of your screen. So it's because they're using the auto, they're not seeing it land up there because they're not zoomed out in that area. So if they actually pick the manual, they see it come in on their cursor and they can physically place it. So for tonight, this one's set up to come right in the middle, so it doesn't really matter. But we might just use auto center, origin to origin to be fine. And notice now that I've ticked current view only, the place at view is grayed out. So it's going to come into the finished floor level anyway. So once we've set those things up, we can say open, and it should just think about it for a few seconds, and then you'll see it bang straight in the middle. So you can click on this CAD file and you'll notice that it comes in as a bit of a block. It's not lots of separate lines, and it's also automatically pinned to our project, so we can't move it unless we unpin it. Okay, so we'll keep it pinned so it doesn't move because we want to start drawing our walls around it. And so this project is set up with brick veneer walls, and the thickness is 250. So that brick veneer wall type that we used before as practice will be the same wall type we use. So what we will do is start using the wall tool, but we can actually do pick lines. And when we do pick lines, we've only got to pick one side at a time. We want to draw straight over the windows. We don't want to leave a gap for the windows, because from last week when we noticed we put doors and things in, above the door and the windows is a wall. So the window only puts that opening in. So if we leave it, stop drawing at the window and continue drawing, we won't be able to host a window and door, because essentially there's got to be no wall there. Okay, so we want one piece around each side. So let's have a break, and then when we come back we'll just start this project, and we'll probably get a fair way through then. It'll stop us having to stop and start again. Sound good? So now that we're ready to start putting some walls in, as I said, what we'll do is we'll trace around this. If you want to just watch me first, just to give you a bit of an idea, I'm going to go to the Architecture tab, and I'm going to grab my wall tool, and we are going to use the brick veneer 250. So when I start to use that one, the first thing I want to make sure is that I've got the height or the top constraint set to the finished ceiling level, which I have. And at the moment my finish location line is core face exterior. I'll just try and make my finish face exterior, I think. Finish face exterior. And I'm going to use the pick line button. So when I use the pick line button, as I pick over this whole wall, you can see that depending on which line I pick, the little blue dashed line is sort of appearing above or below. I sort of need that to line up with about the middle there. So that's where I want to put it, except I've put it around the wrong way. See how it's around the wrong way? Now if that happens, what you need to do then, this is sort of probably explains this finish face exterior sort of thing. The location line, if I keep it as finish face exterior, and this is placed here and I flip it, so there's the little flip arrows, it'll flip over the exterior line. See how it flipped over that exterior wall line? If I then want to change that, if I go center line and flip it over, it'll actually mirror on itself a little bit more, but because it's 250 it sort of doesn't really work quite well for this one. So the other way we can draw some lines is, so this is just giving you an idea of how you might draw things. Instead of using pick line, you can just draw the line, and if I keep my finish face exterior, I'll pick that corner and start to draw it across this way. See that? So we've got chain selected, and then we can just go all the way to this corner down here, pick it out to this corner down here. So wait till you get that little snap point, end point, little rectangular one, and we're just basically tracing over all of the walls and just going right around the perimeter until we get right back up to the start. So that's drawn all the outside walls already. Hit escape a couple of times and I can see it in 3D. It's come up to the right level. on my external walls. So have a go at that, drawing those exterior walls. I'm going to do mine again. I'm going to hit the wall button. We're going to hit the brick veneer timber. I don't mind if you use brick veneer, the 250 timber or steel, but if you're whatever one you're using, just remember, because the internal walls want to be the same material when we do the 90 studs. Type of door that we've got here is our on our schedule there. It shows you we've got this M single flush family mostly, until we get to there's a sliding door, which is that number 10. But the rest are just this M single flush door, but at varying widths. So if we go to the architecture tab and then go to the door button, you'll see that the M single flush is already loaded in there anyway. So what we need to do is decide which ones we can use in here. So the first option is 8132134, and on that little PDF, if we got an 8132134. So door number 2, 3, 5 and 6. So those doors are for those particular ones. So 2, 3, 5 and 6. So when you're placing these doors in, if I just place number 2 in here, when you hover over, you'll see that depending on which side of the wall, it's going to snap to. So make sure you sort of try to line it up pretty close to start with, and then just click, and you should pretty well be able to snap it. If you've placed the door and it's in the wrong, swinging the wrong side, you can hit the space bar as you're placing it. You'll flip it from side to side, and obviously just moving your cursor off the door, off the wall, will flip it from one side of the wall to the other. So if your door won't load into the spot that you're trying to put it, it might be that you haven't actually put the wall in that spot yet. Remember, they're wall hosted. And so some of the door sizes we might have to change a little bit. So the first instance, notice that little toilet door. So that's door number 7, I think, 2134 high, but 762 wide. So what we can actually do there, if we haven't got that, have we got one of those? Oh, we have got one of those, 762, yeah. And if your doors aren't, when you're putting your doors in, if they haven't lined up exactly to the CAD plan, remember you've got your align tool that we looked at, so you can actually click on the spot where the door should be and move it. So in this case it should be moved over here a little bit. And this one's offline a little bit. So to load in the sliding door, 2-panel sliding door, you can go to the door button and then go load family. So we'll go load family, find our doors folder, and then look for the sliding 2-panel. And we get a few sizes come in of the sliding 2-panel, but we need a 2040 by 2 meters. So the width is the 2 meters. So we haven't got one of those in the selection there. So we can use one of these to change the height. It doesn't matter which one we start with. We can go edit type and we can actually duplicate it, and we'll change it to the right name. 2040 by 2 meters. So that's got that name now, and then we can actually go in and change the distances in the height down here in the dimension, which was going to be the 2040, and the width was the 2 meters. So once I've done that, I've actually created a new size in that family. and that's ready to place in there. Now when I put my sliding door in, and this will happen when we start to put all of our windows in, because I've drawn over my CAD plan, I can't actually see where those openings are now. Okay, so a good way to fix that is to actually look at our view control panel down the bottom here, and in the visual styles that are given to us, we could actually put wireframe on. If we put wireframe on, it allows us to see through the walls, so you can see the CAD plan underneath, and you should be able then to see where things like the door openings and window openings are. So that way it makes it a little bit easier to locate things like that sliding door. So you can see now, I can see where my windows need to be placed in through there. So that's just manipulating that view to a wireframe view. So a wireframe view allows us to see through and just gives it like a wire look. Probably when you look at your 3D model and you change it in there, it gives you a bit more of an idea of what it's doing to the model. So we need to do the same thing, architectural, go to the Windows button, the fixed lot of there that we can manipulate the sizes from that lot, but we need to load in the Windows folder and find the sliding windows. So we've got sliding 2L Australian, this one here, and we get a heap of sizes there that we can load in. So hopefully some of those sizes match up, so we don't have to do too many customized window sizes for this project. How to do that, I can do it up here for you, duplicating windows and changing the size. So some of these windows at the back here, say number 5, sliding window 15 by 1450 wide. So I could actually just use this window. I'm going to do create similar, so it places that big one in there, which is completely the wrong size. Select it, edit the type, duplicate it. If I just rename it and change the size, it's going to change the one at the front as well that I've already used. And this one was going to be, forgotten what it was already. Number 5 is 15 high by 1450. So 15 high in here and 1450 wide. Change that, and there it is there. And then I've just got to align that window using the align tool with the CAD plan underneath. So there it is there. So just sort of trying to remember all those tools that you've only just learnt, seeing how you can use them. I've recorded all this, so if you want to go back over anything through the week before next week, and if everyone's got their model to about this for next week, we'll be able to all start with this model with just all the windows and doors in. So I'm into my 3D view, so in my floor plan it's looking like this. I can now turn off wireframe for now. I don't need the wireframe because I don't need to see what's happening underneath. If I go back to my default 3D view, you can see some of the windows are sitting right at the top, and just depending on what height they came in by default on that floor plan. But in the PDF it suggests that all the head height for all the windows is 2100. So we would need a head height of 2100. So a really quick way to change that is in my 3D model. If I actually select all of the model with a window crossing like this, use my filter to just check none of them, just the windows. So it's just my windows that are selected now. And then over here in the properties of these windows, I can slide down and I can find a little category called head height, and in there if I type 2100, all of the windows just went to the right height. So what that does then is makes them all line up to the top of the door. So that door height was about 2100 or close to. So when you use it, when you're building with a brick house, brick veneer type situation, you've got to pick a head height where you want your windows and your doors to finish based on brick heights, because you don't want it to finish halfway through a brick. So depending on your rebate and how you've worked it all out, you'll pick something that's going to be quite uniform. The other thing now that throws up, and someone had already done this, that the question came up, is when I've got those up to that head height here, some of the smaller windows in the bathroom, if I look back at my finished floor plan, have now disappeared. So I can't actually see these two windows here. Any suggestions why that might be? I can see them when I hover over it, but seems to be not showing there. Yes, they're above the camera view. So because our camera view is set to 1200, these windows are above that 1200. It's not cutting through the windows. So if I have a look at that elevation here, where these windows are, and do a quick measurement, the bottom of these windows from the floor line is actually 1500. So the camera is cutting through under here. It's getting everything else but those. So if we change the cut plane to about 1550, we'd be within all of them. So we can do that in our floor plan view if we want to cut our cut plane, change our cut plane. So over in the properties of the view, when there's nothing selected, we can change the view range. There's the 1200 cut plane, change it to 1550, apply an OK, and those windows have just appeared. Okay. Now when we're playing with that cut plane over here, we just got to be careful, just bear in mind in the future, that view range, we wouldn't want to change that offset to anything much higher than about 1700, because if we start changing it to higher than the top of the doors inside, then we'd lose the doors. So you have to think about where everything's positioned on the walls. So if you made it at 2100, chances are you wouldn't see any of your doors as well. So you've got to be sort of careful of that. If you've got really high windows and you want to be able to see them, there's another way to do it, and that's using the View tab, and it's called a Plan View, and you do this Plan Region. And a Plan Region is literally sketching like a little rectangle, and that becomes a new range of cut. So if it's just for like one or two instances of really high level windows that you want to see, rather than change your view to just get those and miss everything else, there is ways of doing it. So we'll go over that when we do maybe the next drawing. We'll change, you know, some cut planes and that. So just only explain that tonight because it came up. It comes up with those ones for those high windows. So if everyone sort of gets to the stage where they've put all their windows and doors in like this and has aligned them, you know, to the correct spots, next week when we come in, we'll put a floor and a roof on this one, and we can look at all the different options for roofs and floors, and we'll sort of go from there. So if you didn't finish the exercises A, B and C, try to finish those between now and next week as well, because that'll just get you back into that drawing and your modify tools, and then just at least get your model to about this stage for next week so we can all continue at the same stage. Any questions about anything tonight? Starting to draw now, starting to sort of get into what we're going to be doing. So from here on in now, we're just going to be drawing houses basically, which hopefully that's why you're all here, to learn how to draw houses. If you're not, you're in the wrong class. I wonder if you're not feeling heaps comfortable with all your commands and that yet. That's totally normal. We're still in early days. I think it's only four sessions now. It's the first real drawing we've done tonight, so don't be thinking, oh, I didn't get any of that. That's pretty normal. What we're doing now, we're going to be repeating and doing it lots of different ways for the next, 12 weeks or so. So make sure you just have a bit of a play if you can now. Download your software at home, have a bit of a play during the week. I find at this stage when you've started doing, then you start asking me more questions because you've had something not work at home or you couldn't figure something out. You can bring that question into class and then you'll, go a bit further and a bit further. So the more things you can do through the week and then come back and ask me on the Monday nights, the better you're going to be at it. All right, see you all next week.